Are monopolies good or bad for society? It's kind of a loaded question to ask, but we do want to approach it using the economic intuition that we have been developing. And inherently, consumers are going to be better off with more competition, so we want to go ahead and see what kind of costs the monopoly is going to impose on society itself. And there are three of them that we can go ahead and take a look at in economics. So, question that we want to ask is the big loaded question: are monopolies good or bad for society? So, are monopolies good or bad for society? Or bad for society. And they are going to be good for us in a few cases, but we'll get to that later. We want to focus in on the three inefficiencies that monopolies are going to impose on us. So the three costs. We do notice that consumers are better off with more competition. Are better off with more competition. And under the monopoly case, there's the least amount of competition. So consumers are actually going to be hurt in this scenario. And how exactly can we measure how much they're going to be hurt by? Well, we go back to our friends, the idea of surplus. So consumer surplus, producer surplus, and our inefficiency, the deadweight loss. So we want to compare monopoly and perfect competition with these ideas of efficiency and welfare. Under the conditions of monopoly, we do notice that the price will be higher and output will be lower than under the conditions of competition. And anytime we can't reach our social amount of quantity within the marketplace, this is going to create an inefficiency known as deadweight loss. So the very first type of cost that monopolies impose on us, on society, is this inefficiency, which we already know is the deadweight loss. So compare the perfectly competitive market case on the left-hand side with the monopoly case on the right-hand side. Under the perfect competition, as we said, this is where our total surplus is going to be maximized, this market structure, because there is nothing preventing us from reaching the social amount of quantity being provided out to the marketplace. There is nothing stopping us from reaching the equilibrium price and socially optimal amount of quantity. Consumer surplus, consumer surplus, producer surplus, the sum of both of these, the total surplus, is always going to be maximized. However, what do we notice under the monopoly case? We notice that under the monopoly case, that the price is higher. So PM in this instance, the price is higher compared to the competitive case. And that stems from the monopolist practicing its market power. It has market power. It wants to raise prices as high as it can. What do we notice about the quantity? We notice that QM right here compared to QC is lower. So in order for the monopolists to raise prices, they have to reduce the supply they are providing out into the marketplace. So quantity is lower, prices are higher, so therefore we notice that we are never going to be operating at the socially optimum point right here. And what does this do for our ideas of efficiency and welfare? Who's going to be hurt by the higher prices? Consumers are going to be hurt by the higher prices, so we notice that consumer surplus is going to be less compared to the perfectly competitive case. Who's going to gain? That's going to be the producer, so the monopolist in this instance. The monopolist says, hey, we raise prices, we love high prices, so producer surplus is larger compared to the perfect competitive case. But because we are not under the sort of idea of equilibrium, we notice that we are creating some type of inefficiency, and this inefficiency is going to be deadweight loss. So before we were able to sell QC units of output, but now the monopolist is reducing supply and we're only able to sell QM units, so therefore this is inefficiency within the marketplace. And because we have inefficiency, we notice that total surplus is going to be less in the monopoly case compared to the perfectly competitive case. So let's go ahead and write down the few sort of comparisons that we noted with this. We notice that we want to compare the monopoly compared to perfect competition. Compared to perfect competition. Perfect competition. What do we notice about the price? We notice the price is going to be higher, so that PM compared to the PC, monopolies are going to always practice market power. They have market power. They want to raise prices as high as they can. We notice that the quantity is going to be lower. They reduce supply in order to raise prices. Because of this, our idea of efficiency and welfare are also going to change. Consumer surplus is going to be lower. Consumers are hurt by the higher prices and lower quantity, while producers are going to be gaining in place of them. So producer surplus has to be higher. Deadweight loss, on the other hand, Because we are now being inefficient, deadweight loss is going to be higher compared to perfect competition. And then finally, because we are being inefficient, our total surplus is going to have to be lower or decreasing. So we can hit on these main variables right here of both price and quantity and our ideas of efficiency with the monopoly compared to perfect competition. Remember that we said perfect competition is the only market structure where total surplus is going to be maximized, and all the other market structures, there's always going to be some type of inefficiency, there's always going to be some type of deadweight loss, which causes the total surplus to be lower. And this deadweight loss is only the first cost that is going to be imposed on only the first cost that monopolies are going to impose on society. There's two more additional costs that we need to delve into just a little bit more, and we'll see what these two additional costs are going to be in the next video. I'll see you guys.